38% of workers would rather have an AI manager than a person. I don't know whether that's shocking that's so high or so low. I really don't know, but that is really cool.
We say only 31% of organizations are using AI currently in their HR processes, and it drops to 12%. We're talking about embedded HRMS AI, right? And we're like, well, everybody's using AI. I'm like, well, it depends on how you're talking about it. And the short answer is yes, 81% of HR professionals told us that they were using AI to do a process or to do work related, right? Like not to do an HR process, but to do the kind of things that I think we're all doing, which is develop a plan, redo a PowerPoint, create, a new email, reword something, right? Which is again, sort of standalone personal performance work, right? The big thing that we also noted though, is that only about 14% of them are getting that paid for by work. Only another, or 14% of them are paying for that on their own. Another like 30%, 40%, depending on sort of how you look at the number, are getting something paid for by work that they're kind of using in that fashion. The remainder of them are using a free version.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome everyone to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. We're recording today, which is basically, how is it this late already? September 24th, 2025, just after the HR Tech Conference, by the time you listen to that, about 2 weeks after. And I'm your host, Stacey Harris, a Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, and we are a research and advisory firm, if you don't know who we are. And joining me today is my illustrious guest, host, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research here at Sapient Insights Group. Welcome to the show, Cliff. I'm obviously already tripping over words because we're exhausted. We just got back from HR Tech like 3 days ago, right?
That's right. We're doing this at night. It's just usually we kind of you take the week kind of not off, but a little time to recoup. I think all of you should do that. Been hearing a lot of people saying they're not feeling well. Please, if you went to HR Tech, get your rest, drink your water. We, however, do not get that luxury.
We gotta keep going. Like,
we gotta keep going.
Too much news going on.
And I also we were kind of laughing in the green room beforehand, and that all of our clothes are at the dry cleaner. But I swear, and I know I say this because we have a video version of this as well. You can find us on YouTube. We do not coordinate this. Right now, Stacey's wearing black with red over. I'm wearing pink over, and I'm wearing pink with the black over.
We really don't
know how this happens.
No. It was something at HR Tech Conference. So if anybody saw us at HR Tech Conference, so everybody's like, it's the pink mafia coming down, right? The hallway. We take over in our pink. Us and iSolved get confused a lot, right? Without, even trying, but it's definitely become, it makes it a little easier to get like getting ready for events because I just kind of put the pink stuff in the suitcase. But I will have to say I've bought out every pink outfit in every store that there is right now. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of big stories. A lot of stories always come out of HR Tech, and we have some M&A stuff. But I thought it would be nice too, just to kind of recap HR Tech. We've been talking so much about it, and of course, it's a really big event in general for just the industry. But it's a big event for us at Sapient Insights Group because yearly, for I don't even know how long, Stacey, you have always done.
Many years. It's been around 28 years. Yeah, before it was Lexi who did it, right?
Yeah, where we give everyone the results of this huge, massive survey. It was big back then. It's somehow bigger now. Over 10,000 participants representing over 4,361 organizations. Not that I'm keeping score. But yeah, and as always, your keynote was packed. You had a few other presentations we can get into, but it was what we've been talking about, the presentation of all this. And I'll tell you, I've got pictures to prove it. That house was packed.
Yeah, I talked to someone today who was in there and in the back, and she was like, yeah, there was like, because I couldn't see, right? It's a bunch of round tables. So it's a little bit hard to kind of tell how full it is. But I guess the back, there was standing, like people were trying to find places to sit, which again, it was the big ballroom, like the one that they do like the morning stuff in. And I was like, okay, I didn't realize that. If I'd have known that, we would have made room up front for everybody. So if you sat in the back, we're trying to find a seat, my apologies. But there was no seats, chairs. There was just tables up front. So yeah, I think what really, first I gotta say thank you to Steve Bowes because as I was getting ready to go up, he basically said, like, I think we can run over by like 5 or 10 minutes, and I need every one of those extra 5 or 10 minutes. But this year, what's nice is it has been harder and harder every year to kind of launch the full paper at the same time as the HR Technology Conference. So we have moved over the last 5 years to moving key findings at that event. But because we have an amazing team, which you lead up, Cliff, who was busting their rear ends over the last couple of weeks, we got 3 of our what we call segment reports, which is basically our segments of the big paper, completed and ready for purchase. And those are payroll, HRMS, and emerging technology this year. So those are available online. You can look at them right now if you want to download that. And they're much more sort of smaller cost. If you do purchase those and you decide you want the full paper, I think we're going to do some discounts down the road around that, right? But Cliff, I mean, this is, I think, one of the first years where you and I, we've had a group of people who've been helping us with sort of all the data analysis, but with the first years where you and I weren't up the night before we went to HR Tech till like 3 a.m. trying to get papers done. So first, let's just comment on how did that feel to actually be at HR Tech without having a paper hanging over your head that was due like the night of, right?
Yeah, I will say that there may have been some late nights, but they were with our friends and with our clients.
Yeah,
You're right. It still was, it didn't mean that we got more sleep, but you're right. It does feel nice, and it gives us an opportunity to double check things and to have more time to verify, what we've written. We know the data is good, but here's what happens. Just like the show, there can be late breaking news stories, things that happen where we need to address that. We want to make sure that what's written in there is as close as we can get to modern. And keep in mind, we do update this. If something major happens, we will go into the paper and make sure that the newest version reflects that. But yeah, it's really nice because at the show, there's so much going on. And we're going to talk a little bit about all the companies we meet, and we want to be able to give you all our full attention. So really a shout out to the team that was mentioned, to Tammy Smith, to Allison, Summer, both of which Summer has had her baby. I know we normally mention at the end. It's just so exciting because we've seen photos this week.
We have a new sapient baby and a little boy, and Summer's very she already's making calls today, which I was like, Summer, you're only been out 2 weeks. You got it right. Like, but I think, she's chomping at the bit to sort of at least get back a little bit. And I always tell people, if you haven't had a baby before, those first couple of weeks actually can be kind of boring if you're right, because they sleep so much, right? So so if you're like checking your email and things, so I said what it gets really kind of crazy is like 2 months later when they start moving and people get sick and you just need more time and they're not sleeping as much and then all of a sudden you need more time. So I said all of that works out. But yes, we have a new sapient, and Allison, probably by the time this posts, we will have another new one, sapient.
Yeah, probably by the time this comes, we'll see. But yeah, and I also want to thank Caitlin Diamond, who did a lot of the work with us and just really coordinated effort. Kendall Lowry, who was at the event with us, who was really doing, whichever deity pray to, who was doing their work of herding cats. I think I heard the term used when they thought I wasn't listening. So
yeah, Cole, right? Yeah, because he got all of the names up on the website for all the top 5 winners. That was a lot of work.
Yeah. If you get to see your name in bright lights, it's due to him. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And then Amy Anthony, who's the newest member of the team, she's doing a lot of our copy editing, which again, without her, little typos, things that, sometimes she catches stuff like, this chart doesn't have the right legend. That's been very nice to have a second set of eyes on it as well. So not to mention Susan and Terry, who also are supporting it and make sure that it gets over the finish line and making sure we have time to get it done by taking off a lot of the stuff off our plate. So it's been a team effort, and it's definitely been a very big one this year, right? And we got 10 more sections, Cliff, I think, right? And 3 weeks to go right now, right? 4 weeks ago.
It'll be ready. We're going to have a big webinar debuting that. So it'll be sort of like what you saw if you didn't get a chance to see Stacey's keynote, or even if you did, it will be kind of the full debut of all of that information on October 30th. And that full paper will be ready October 31st. So definitely, like I said, the team put a lot of work into it. Let us know, if there's stuff you'd like to see more of. Let us know. If there are any problems with it, please address that email only to me, and I'll tell the team that they did perfect, and I will be the only one to handle that shame. But it really is. It's really nice, and it's really great. And, the keynotes are great. Can we talk a little bit about just what we saw there? Because I know we do have a lot of news, too.
We do, yes.
But there were a lot of companies that both of us met with all over the I was about to say, kind of all over the map, but I think that's literally true. I think we do every year. We always compare how many steps. I think we reached a half marathon last year, and I think we made 18 miles this year. And a couple of times Tammy and I checked, and we were in sync. So I know that even though people are going at different places, different times, it was about that distance. Madness.
Yeah, I was like 10,000 steps a day, and then I hit like 18,000 one day. So I don't know how many steps are in a mile, if you guys had figured that out, but I think I was 10,000 all the days except for one of those days. And I think it might've been like Wednesday, where it was a back and forth kind of thing
Yeah. I think you got 10 miles.
Yeah,
You're all over this stage.
it was, yeah.
Animated.
There was a lot of back and forth. What I think, the one thing, I wanted to mention was, I think this year HR Executive Magazine, or ARC, the group who sort of supports that, we did get a chance to have some more conversations with Catherine Childress and Becky, who we worked with for years, Rebecca out there, as well as the team, Jamie Weiss, who did such a great job in supporting the program, about sort of what their plans are for the organization. And I'm on an advisory council now, which I was really, really excited to be on. I got a chance to meet myself with a couple other people who were there to talk about sort of what is happening, right? And what the audiences are looking for from HR Executive Magazine and HR Tech Conference, which is now branded as. I think a couple things we saw very clearly. The vendor locations, like the vendor environment, was a little bit brighter and a little bit easier to navigate. So that's just I think a win for them in general, to be able to get around and find organizations a little bit easier. They did tracks, which I think were a little more easier to see what were the topics that you were covering and be able to see the things you wanted to cover at the HR Tech Conference. The mobile device was by far the best I've seen. It's one of my favorite tools now that they had. I was able to actually find stuff on that mobile device, and in previous years I could never use the mobile device. Now it was really, really good. So I think they've made a lot of updates which have really made a difference. This year the keynote was, I believe, the CHRO from IBM, I believe it was. I believe so. That is one of their award winners. And I heard some really great things. There was a very practical guidance and advice there, right? So we did see a lot of that. I heard a lot of good feedback from the vendors that the conversations were at the high level that they needed them to be. A little bit light on some of the practitioners, but I think that it depends on where you were at and who was coming to the booth. And I had a great conversation today with the person that I did my panel with, the Women in Tech HR event. And, she had some great feedback on sort of, she did not know, which I thought was an interesting thing, about tech analysts, right? She had subscribed to Burson Associates back in the day, and she said she had met me, but she said once she got there, she said it was this whole world of tech analysts that she just didn't know about until she'd come to HR Tech Conference. And I thought that was kind of cute, that, cute being in the sense that, we sometimes are in our own world and forget that a lot of people don't know that there's this group of people who kind of follow all of the technology and try and make sure people are up to date in it and do all these reports that we do, right? So that was kind of...
actually, that kind of, I'm sorry this isn't in the script, but it just reminded me of something you said during your keynote, which is something that on the other side, kind of the vendors don't really realize, is just how much growing influence we're seeing from brokerage groups and advising collectives and things like that, which we talked to some of them, and really they're there in full force too. You don't see them because they don't have booths necessarily, but your Boltons of the world, IMAs and MMAs and those sort of group are really represented very well there. And there's a whole, like you said, another world that you may not realize till you get there and you start to say, okay, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of great resources out there for anyone that's on either side, I guess, of the aisle.
Yeah, that was good. Did you want to mention some of the vendors that we had briefings with real quickly?
And a few others too. And I'll do this quickly just to kind of give everyone an update. We were talking about putting in a lot of miles, did that with Greenhouse. They did, rather than sort of a pub crawl, they did a restaurant crawl. It was really cool idea. We did that over at the Aria. I got to talk a lot with Karen, their CMO, and with their CEO, Daniel Chait. Thank you guys for putting up with me while you're trying to eat. And we're just sitting there talking about vendor marketplaces. But that's something that they are very interested. They find, I keep calling it your, Stacey, but I guess we should say ours, concept of this cluster model, of how people are purchasing and how things are getting structured into this bi-directional data transfer and the importance of that and staying within a vendor marketplace. That's something that they are very excited to talk more about. Got to meet with Clar. We actually mentioned them for the first time at their sort of coming out on this podcast, as Adam Weber, who has long been friends of ours, had joined the board. So I finally got to meet with them. And they're one of the first to sort of be an AI, from the world of AI built, right? There's been others that exist in the world of performance management and, tracking outcomes of goals and tying that all together. But they are bringing AI in. They're kind of AI from the ground up, which we're going to see more and more companies that are sort of like that, right? We used to hear about mobile first. You're going to hear about AI first.
AI first, yeah.
Harry, which we've talked about, Jason Saba going over there, but they're very high growth. They work in a specialized industry, but you start to realize just how big that is because that's the restaurant industry, especially the franchise industry. And he alerted me to some interesting regulations and how that's going to affect things. We'll have to talk about that because it's a whole separate one. That might be more for, one of our law friends, the Cape-based office of the world or something to talk about, but really interesting things going on in that world. Plum, they were wonderful to talk to, that it's very rare you see talent management specifically for the enterprise level, and it's one of the reasons we break out the sizes, right? And ours is because things are done differently, and there are vendors that work specifically in that. So that was really neat. I think you and I both got to talk to Skillsoft. They're sort of, I don't know what you call it. I know they probably wouldn't want to use the term relaunching, but sort of bringing back Percipio, right?
Yep.
Which was fascinating. That was a really interesting conversation. And they have like 60% of the Fortune 500, you start to really realize, again, talking about that enterprise level space, for the skills world. And that's something we focused on this year in our paper as well, because we also noted that it was kind of coming back.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because they're kind of in between that skill learning and skills or talent intelligence conversation, right? And so I thought, Skillsoft is something I think people think of as just a content company, right? And they are really talking about how they were creating, that is a content company, but they're offering through Percipio the opportunity to not only do talent intelligence, but to do sort of content editing or tailoring, which I think is a really powerful thing that aligns with the skills conversation and the business culture that you're trying to create, which I think are all big positives, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I met with Alight. That was pretty interesting because we were seeing them come up in our research, and I was talking to their CSO, the Chief Strategy Officer. I was new there. But he's a big believer that the future is going to be agents, meaning AI agents, connecting to other AI agents, right? And I know that we're going to be talking a little later about kind of what's coming up in the AI space, and I thought that was pretty interesting, and that really that's the sort of next stage of self-help service. And so that was pretty cool.
We're at just 4% today, guys, just FYI. So not everybody's using agents from an HR service delivery perspective, but that's looking to grow by like 150% in the next year. So we know it's coming, right?
Find out more in the paper. We got to rate and see. It was pretty interesting. They just acquired My Interview on Tuesday. So I'll throw that in. Yeah.
Shout out to them. The person I was talking to today said they were one of the organizations that they liked best. Because I asked them who they liked best, and it was Radency and OrgView when they were out on the floor. And part of it was because of the assessment company they had just picked up, and they thought they did a nice job in sort of bringing that in. So just a shout out for them. They got a shout out from people that we know on the practitioner side. Right?
That's exactly it. And that's what really highlights one of the things that's really neat about HR tech, right? Is that you go around, you kind of see, okay, here's the big companies, here's the new companies, and talking to other people like, what'd you like? And, oh, that's interesting. And, really getting a sense for what's happening in there, that melding of that qualitative and quantitative, there's nothing wrong with anecdotal data is what I'm trying to say, I guess. In fact, it could be very useful when all brought together. So I love hearing that. Got to meet with Nayya. They've obviously been making a lot of waves at new agent launch, and they're there, I think, like a lot of HR tech, is really build partnerships and develop that marketplace, tying back into that cluster model. They see the futures that way too. So we had a really great conversation around that.
They're more of a benefits decision-making integration kind of platform, right? Like, so they're really focusing on, especially with the new acquisition. Yeah.
Absolutely. Amo, who's long been a player in the HCM space in the East and India, is really, as always, trying to come over here and really set themselves apart as being data-driven, data foundation, using AI only for automation, right, rather than for any decision-making. So really trying to understand, what is going to solve problems, embedding payroll to create global capabilities, right? So they really want to say, hey, look, if you're trying to find a way to, do both, right, to sort of advance and have some global capabilities, we're going to be here for that as part of a larger ecosystem.
And that was similar, I should say, to we didn't do a briefing with them, but we did get a chance to catch up with Ramco at the end of the event. Their CEO was there. And he was walking through kind of that idea that we want to be your global partner. We want to be your partner at the APAC, right? So I think we're seeing a lot more of those on the payroll side where organizations are sort of saying, again, that idea of that platform cluster, like make sure your systems at the enterprise level are doing what you need to do, but then, figure out what partners make the most sense in the regions and in the industries and the spaces that you need, right?
Yeah, and a special shout out to him too, because I believe he, and I heard this from a few other people, flew in directly from India like the night before. That time zone difference is no joke because I think you're on you're near 12 hour. That's madness, and so it's hard enough for us. So real respect there. Workday, we obviously want to talk about. They had some acquisitions. We're going to talk about that a little more in depth when we get into the rest of the episode. But we'll talk to them. Don't worry, we got a little of the tea for you. Got to talk to Venture, Kevin Andrews, their CEO, who was has always been very active at these events in looking to see how to build out their ecosystem, right? They are a strong, highly connected set of companies that are all under one umbrella, and they want to continue that, right? So continue going down that path of finding what is solving problems for their customers. Surveil, who we mentioned Radency earlier, very strong partners there. So, doing a lot of that feedback, the talent feedback during the really all stages of the talent management journey, but a lot of it in the early parts of recruitment and onboarding in early days. So again, it's really cool, right? All these different aspects you might not even realize are out there. It's really neat meeting with them. Anaplan, you probably talked to them even more than I did.
Yeah.
So Chorus, if there's anything that really stood out to you, he's like us in that I think he likes to go there and almost listen and hear what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, Anaplan is, I think, an interesting organization where they're kind of in, they have one foot in HR and obviously the bigger part in finance and finance planning. And Koros and I have been talking a lot about sort of what is this world of workforce planning and how does it overlap. They have rolled out sort of a workforce planning module that is more HR focused in what they're doing. And I think that's going to, we see them show up in the survey organically. Like they don't even distribute very effectively, right? Like it's just they show up organically, particularly for those organizations who are trying to sort of balance workforce planning with headcount management and resource planning and financials. So one of the things I think we talked about last time was this idea that all these organizations are adding more finance and IT systems to their HR environment. Anaplan is a partner that could help sort of build that out. And I think that's part of where we're going to see more partnerships for them probably once they get this all built out, right?
Excellent. Talked with iSolved. We'll probably have more to talk about there. One thing that stuck out, and I think you mentioned as well in your keynote, is that we're starting to see, we're not starting to see, we're definitely seeing clearly this idea of almost a way to quantify things like reputation and trust, because it's coming through in our vendor satisfaction scores. And iSolved meaning, really take note of that, and they are structuring a lot of their service around that. We mentioned it on a podcast that we did live from the floor as well. But, something that I noted in that podcast, and I think you mentioned too, is that we see in our data probably more, talking about that anecdotal stuff, we see it more than any other company where people will use a direct name, right? Not oh, the customer service of this company is great, but hey, when I called, Jamie was on the phone and she was wonderful. It's like, and they note that. So they make sure that one of the things they're looking at is you will stick with the same agent no matter what, no matter kind of where you go, because we want to keep that relationship strong. We see that from HiBob as well, that they are laser focused on those sort of relationships and that feeling of community through their customers.
Yeah, it shows up in our data. I did get a chance to meet. We did a dinner on Monday night with the HiBob executives. Ronnie, who's their CEO, who I had not met previously, and their founder, brought him and sort of their founding team over, and their new CMO. And I was pleasantly surprised in my conversations with Ronnie that he really did think about. I love founders and founder stories when they're really excited about the practitioner. And again, not from an HR background per se, but from a passion for helping them do the job better and making it easier and making it less complex. That was good to hear. And I think, we see that to some extent in the data as we talked about. But I think to your point, Cliff, sometimes it's not the tech as much as it is the way the services are sort of offered that make as much a difference in some of that, right?
That's right. And I think, I don't know how much you can say, but you're going to be doing some stuff with iSolved Venture in the future, or is that all hush hush?
Yeah. So iSolved is doing an outreach effort to to basically to their sales staff, and we talk a little bit more about it, I think, in another couple weeks, which is basically creating small businesses that will be helping sort of bring customers into the fold for iSolved. And I think it's a unique approach. We've seen this in other models, right? But this one is they're actually helping these professionals get off the ground as their own small business. And I think it's someone who now runs her own small business with partners. There's something to be said about sort of leading your own business. And I think that's what iSolved Ventures is about. And so I think you'll hear more about it in the coming weeks. We're just helping them a little bit with some of the content and stuff. And so it's really exciting to see them get that off the ground. Yeah.
It's wonderful. Lightcast, got a chance to meet with them. They definitely well known. They like to describe themselves, as the Switzerland of HR tech partnerships. Yeah. They're really working. They're really working to say, look, we can work with you. We want to be parts of a whole, right?
Yeah.
Tell you work. They just did acquire Skill Collective, and they are definitely also developing. They have an AI skills agent and are in this space that you and I talked about, this idea of the workforce intelligence platform. I think this was called talent intelligence not too long ago. But if you're hearing this, that's what we're really referring to, right? Talent intelligence, workforce intelligence. I think those are fairly interchangeable. Kind of get through the rest of these. They're all wonderful, of course. I don't want to put anyone aside. iCIMS, I think they don't require an introduction, but giant recruiting platform for the enterprise side. They have whole teams dedicated to their HCM integrations. They're another one where they want to talk a lot about how they work, play nice with others, right? And what to be a part of that cluster, or even in some cases could be that anchor system. So I found that pretty interesting. And we're going to be talking a lot about them because they've also had an acquisition that we'll get to. Eightfold, who we've known for some time, they're continuing this idea of around, the agentic AI and worker intelligence and all of that sort of stuff, really looking at supporting specific recruiting behaviors and tasks. And also got a chance to meet with Daxtra, which is a new company. That's Mike Flannery's company. So they're another one that is they're there to sort of get to know other companies. People might have known them as sort of resume parser, but they are definitely more than that, right? They're looking for a suite of agents that work within the entire early recruitment phase, including, the assessments and stuff. I feel like it keeps going back to assessments. We're going to have to talk about it, Stacey. You had a wonderful session on Tuesday, I believe.
Tuesday, yeah. We did it with the head of assessments for J&J, Christina. And I think the most important thing about that session, which was a fascinating session, was she walked through the history of how recruiting has been impacted by decisions made at a legal level and at a judgment level on that now impacts decisions we're making about how we're going to use AI, which is how do you decide whether a job posting is a legal job posting, and how do you decide how organizations should validate their assessment process for candidates, which is different from once they've been hired employees. And, I think the other big thing we heard from her is that, there's a validation process and a validation technical document that you've really got to pay attention to. And it can't be just a 2-pager document. It's got to show all the steps that an organization has taken to validate that assessment tool is selecting employees without bias, but more importantly, that it is selecting them based on the current job, not future job, not possible job, but current job, and that you can hold that up in court. That is a very stringent thing. And so we talked a lot about how to safely go about adding that into your organization, the assessment tools. So it was a really good session.
Yeah, it really was. It's one of those topics where you might not think it would be of interest to you, and you quickly find out, oh no, this matters a lot. And is actually interesting on its own right. We also met with Insperity. That was another one that it's very rare we get to be at the same time, but we met with Michael Fasciano there. Also want to say hi to Jeff Lash, who just signed on as the head of product. We'll be meeting with him soon. Anything from Insperity, we're obviously talking to them quite a bit. I know you specifically, I can't remember if you used their name, but you definitely shouted out the importance of PEOs and the rise that we're seeing.
Showed up in the data this year, and we've been seeing more and more PEOs show up in the data as buyers sort of call them out, like that's their technology. And Insperity was one of them that showed up, that not quite enough to get the full numbers, but they were pretty high up there, and the user experience, the vendor satisfactions were really high, right? So next year, I think we're going to do a little bit of more of a breakout and actually ask who from a PEO perspective, we're going to ask, a little bit more about those PEOs. I think we have underestimated the impact the small businesses are having on this market. And that is a big part of that impact is PEO firms as well. I think we'll hear more about those over time, right?
Last two for me, meeting with Corn Ferry, that was pretty interesting. I used to be in the RPO space back when I was doing HR. So to me, that's a well-known name, but they are now in the tech business. They have 9 products in the market, heavily focused on, self-service, but skills was a big thing that we all talked about. Stacey, I know that was towards the end of Thursday. So if you had anything that stuck out, but I understand if you didn't, we were all kind of getting a little tired then, right?
No, I think Corn Ferry, I think people think of them as a services-based company, right? To your point, the RPO, I used them a lot for competency management services, right? When I was running leadership-based for Joanne Stores back in the day. But they are a tech platform now. They have a tech component to what they're doing, and they showed up in our skills management area. And I think that they were surprised because, again, this is the wonderful thing about our survey. We survey everyone and we talk about all your products. And Corn Ferry is like, oh, we didn't even know we were in there. And we're like, well, your customers knew you, right? So that was, I think, a real fun.
Yeah.
I always love it when we get to those events. We're like, hey, by the way, you showed up in the report, and the eyes get really big, right?
Yeah. And to be fair, ours do too sometimes. So we see some names like that can't really.
Yeah.
No, all of a sudden we're in deep research but yeah, it's interesting. And then finally, Daily Pay. I want to especially shout them out because just as they are the last one I'm talking to here, they're the last ones I talked to after the event was actually closed. I think, Stacey, you and I, that's when you talked to Ramco, right? We're like, could we just get a couple minutes, talk about that stuff? So thank you, Brand, by the way, for making that happen. But yeah, that was pretty cool. They're really obviously they're in the EWA, Earned Wage Access, on-demand pay space, but they are another one that sees themselves as part of a rich marketplace and what else can they do. So they're really trying to partner with, like Stride and Lemonade, Pet Insurance, shout out to pet owners, like all those sort of things going on. So they see that, and they just like, some of these things we're going to talk about, like, well, I think as you mentioned, like assessments, you start to realize how powerful this sort of stuff is. Having this, I was about to say sweet, I don't want to use the word, like a rich marketplace of tools, I think is really resonating with buyers.
Yeah. And then just a couple shout outs, couple that I went to that you didn't get a chance to go to that we were sort of swapping off is I did get a chance to meet with the Oracle team. You're going to find out more from them in Oracle World. I don't think there was anything big there. It was just they were wanting to know a little bit more about what was going on in the research. I think they've got a lot of announcements about their agentic AI, but that's not surprising. SAP SuccessFactors, we also had a couple of interviews with, and their new, I think, Joule product it is, and their AI. So very AI focused on that front, right? I also had a chance to talk to Vizier and their V product, sort of more rollouts around that. And I think sort of Vizier is really trying to kind of think about how they become an aggregator tool from this AI conversation. So that's kind of an interesting role that they're trying to play. And then I think one of the last ones that I got a chance to that you and I both didn't get a chance to is Darwin Box. Darwin Box is an HRMS payroll solution, more primarily been over in the APAC market, who is now trying to come into the US market, like many other organizations. And they have really aggressive goals to go into the US market. The user experience of Interstat, from what I hear, we don't have any of their data in our data set this year or for past years. That's their big focus, is that they, again, are AI first, and they're very focused on that user experience. And so it'll be interesting to see if we can get some more of their data this year and be able to show you if that comes out. I know there's a lot of vendors who are hyping them, and I think that they're very interested in sort of moving forward in the market. We did also get to talk to some of our investor friends, Scott Berg over at Needham, TD Cowen, and I know TD Cowen's launching their big payroll report actually this week, which is based off of our data, and we'll be doing a talk with them this Friday, but we did get some time with them as well. So yeah, and then Cornerstone, we got to spend an hour in Cornerstone's booth. They had us there both as Ask the Experts. And they're really pushing hard, not just on AI and that Galaxy conversation they've been having, but I think the big focus for them is executing on this as a sort of across the board sort of talent connector inside your organization, which is a good way to put it, right? Is that idea that they have the skills, they have the data, they have the learning. And we're going to talk a lot about learning here pretty soon. That was a big conversation for them, is that we do a lot more than people probably know us for. And so I think we'll hear more about what Cornerstone is doing there too.
Yeah.
So
they were another one, that believed in that workforce intelligence concept. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure we've missed somebody, Cliff, but it was a packed event this year, right?
Yeah. Feel free to leave a comment. If you're on YouTube, you can do that right away. Let us know, drop us an email. We'd be glad to shed you out. And of course, it was great seeing our practitioner friends like Deanna Forson and anyone else that you wanted to shout there.
Yeah, Myers was there. And we saw our good friends from LinkedIn Talent Acquisition. I got to see people from J&J, a lot of the big companies that we work with on a regular basis. So it was nice to see everybody together. What I will say is that if you didn't see any rhyme or reason to the list that Cliff was giving, because every year we try and come up with a strategy for how we're going to meet with the vendors. Every year gets blown to bits by just last minute. Oh, I want to get in and have a conversation. So if you have a better way to help us think through how to work through the vendors, we're open to that. It's a long list and we like doing it. It's just, it really makes for a very busy week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have all this on LinkedIn as well. But we mentioned and we teased this, that there's always a lot of acquisitions around this time. Right? And one of the ones we sort of mentioned is Workday. That's probably one of the biggest ones, acquiring Sana. You could think of that, Sana, if you didn't already know them, kind of in that, I think they call it enterprise knowledge. I think you could call it learning if you wanted to. That's probably not how they would see it.
That's what the announcement said. And then you're telling me that's not what they want to be known for, right?
But yeah, it is the idea where it all comes together. The way they phrase is bringing data, knowledge, and learning and action all coming together. And that's really, from my conversation with them, what they were really looking at is this is more of a part of a puzzle, not to just have it there, right? Not just say, okay, now you can do learning, but really say, okay, what is it you are trying to do? What specific tasks are you trying to do? You need to make sure that you're upskilling somebody over time, maybe because of AI, right? So you need to have everything there. You need to have the content. You need to know what their current skills are. You need to be able to tie that into what they may go to for their next pay, if that's the case, compensation and payroll and everything needs to be together, right? So they saw that as kind of a missing piece of the puzzle and they moved on it. And that was something that was very important to them. And the idea being that it is a productivity sort of solution, right? Not just a learning solution.
I think that's the thing that caught my eye is they were not, as much as they have a learning solution and an agent solution, they were focusing on that productivity model of around what it could do. I think we do have to call out that this solution, Sana, it's been around since about 2016, but it is also the foundation for Josh Berson's solution called Galileo, which so that it's built off of that. And they have a couple of other things that are built off of it. I think there's been some conversation in the market of, okay, so is it a foundational tool that you're going to build on top of? Is it going to be the agent model and the workflows? So I'm very interested in seeing and I know they talked to you quite a bit about it, Cliff, when you got a chance to meet with them. I think we'll get more probably when I'm in EMEA at their Workday Europe event. Is like, because the organization Sana is from, I believe the Netherlands is where they're originally from. Garrett, who is their head of product over there now, was very, very focused in his commentary about how this is going to help them sort of speed up the idea of sort of reimagining personalized experiences for Workday, right? And so this is very much a user interface play. And so it'll be interesting to see how much they continue to invest in the learning side of it too, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have other investments, other acquisitions. We mentioned iCIMS. They acquired Apli, which is very much another one of these born from the world of AI.
Yeah.
So recruitment automation. And the idea here in my discussion with them and from what they're putting out is this is very frontline worker focused. If we had said AI a bunch, you probably noticed we said frontline workers about as much over the past couple months. This is something that a lot of organizations are seeing. Stacey back in, I want to say February or so, shared some of the data that's coming from the World Economic Forum about how we're getting into this talent gap and how important it will be to give the tools for the frontline workers. Not just, we need to give it to them, but like there needs to be things specialized for them. And a lot of that is developed here for that. So they can, be on their phone in certain locations and go through, for instance, an assessment, which is part of what they found to be very strong about the Apli platform, and obviously works well with iCIMS to be not just, so focused on knowledge workers, but now really get after everything could be needed from any frontline worker in any space.
And we've got to just do a call out here based on our data. Our data is very clear that sort of iCIMS customers are a lot of time, because they work with the biggest enterprises in the market generally, are a lot of Workday customers as well. And so with Workday acquiring Paradox, and this is a kind of a counter to that to say, look, we can do frontline just as well. Don't know how that's all going to play out, but I think that definitely was part of probably that conversation as well. Yeah. But I think from my perspective, competition, all the better, right? Like this is going to make that mark, which we have not always spent as much time on frontline workers as we need to. This is going to make us focus there. I think we're going to get some better products because of it, right?
Yeah, and I guess this is true tea we're spilling here, but I'll say that acquisition not to go unnoticed. They're looking to do this.
Yeah.
But you're right. The idea being like, okay, then we're going to help these people too. We're going to make things better too. So then let's go. That's a good kind. So we've got further acquisitions. Nayya, who we talked about just a little bit ago, right? They've acquired North Star. So there's actually kind of two bits of news here, right? They released an AI agent. So they'll have agentic AI health and wellness benefit solutions through their platform. But they also acquired North Star, right? Which is very much in the financial wellness space, which was very interesting. We have been talking, as much as we talk in frontline, I feel like we're putting everything at top. Finance is extremely important. Here we go. We're really talking about a true cluster of organizational systems. This is a continuation of a conversation that's been happening this whole calendar year of this blurring of the lines between what constitutes HR tech. And we know for sure finance is part of it. Heck, you're going to a finance and accounting trade expo, right? That's what Fate.
In November,
so we see the data. I mean, we see it first. So we know this is what's happening. They see what's happening. So Nayya clearly wants to make sure that they're a part of that and make sure that they have some financial sort of planks on their platform.
Yeah. And I think, there's two things to your point with Nayya. They're a big integrator platform, right? Like they do that. And then there's also what I think their CEO kind of called out, this sort of last mile of the value of benefits, right? Which is sort of the data comes back. Employees know what they're using it for. They know why the value of it is. There's a bit of that, it looks like, was built into this as well. So I'm interested to see how this is going to expand their capabilities when we learn more about it, right?
Absolutely. And then we get Helios. We don't get to talk about them too much.
Not much anymore, yeah.
Yeah, but they completed a acquisition of Connectiverse, which is, and okay, if you haven't heard of it, I'll be fully honest, I hadn't either. But Connectiverse basically is a big marketplace of anything that would do with any of your legal services, compliance services, anything you need for expansion. They've been around for, I think 20 years or so. They've got 20,000 local experts in legal, HR, payroll, accounting, and tax. So basically Helios, if they're going to be setting up payments, and again, this is kind of a good small business play, right? What do they need? What's everything associated with that? I feel like I should start getting 10 cents every time I say cluster model, but you can see it again, right? What are all the little pieces that you need to put together? I know that in our research, one thing that you can set your watch on is you will need more and more integrations. There's more and more systems that are going to be in your stack, no matter the size of your company, every year. It's absolute clockwork, and this is a part of the services and systems that will support that.
Yeah, and similar to that, we also met with a TMF global group, which is a group like Krishna works for. We've known him for a long time, and we were having a conversation with him and his team. They kind of do more of a services model, not so much tech, although they are getting ready to roll out a tech. That is that same kind of thing. We will help you set up the administrative services for operating safely around the world, right? Like that whole concept of in a lot of people don't realize this, but when I go global, legally, you're supposed to have an entity in those countries where you're hiring from, right? Sometimes we can do employer of record that sort of works around that, but you have to be very careful, and they have to have legal entities in those environments, right? So, but most big companies set up their own, and then there's just a lot of legal red tape around that and paperwork. And so these groups seems to be sort of the thing that they're kind of going after, is this kind of a model of how do I get people to help work more effectively globally, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so basically a lot of M&A activity right there. But we mentioned that we would be coming back to talk about smart recruiters, and sure enough, we have a strategic partnership, something that can be just as effective as acquisitions. And smart recruiters and Enborder have announced that strategic partnership, very much with integrations of their AI agents. Yeah. So to really try and do what, if you're in talent acquisition, you'll be used to hearing this term, right? It's the employee journey, the candidate journey, making that seamless as possible, right? Making sure that those agents handle that knowledge transfer and that experience throughout the system. So that's the idea, right? Because I think that's one of the things that separates a cluster. And I know that you talk about this in your key findings. And I think that's something people, if they want to get a hold of that, they'll notice is you kind of talk about what separates a cluster from just a bunch of integrations.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with that bidirectional data transfer and that very strong sort of stuff. It's not just, oh, I can talk to it, but it is constantly talking to each other. And that's what they're
doing integrations. It's more than just a piece of paper. It's more than just a referral back. Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And I think that is the idea behind this. And it really does sort of, again, address that gap that we were seeing sometimes with that connection. Speaking of connections, our friend Tony Spangler and a few other people from what used to be called the Star Conspiracy and has been called TSC for the last little while. After almost 12 years, Tony is joining RepCap. So that's pretty cool. I think who else is going over there? Steve Smith and Lance Hahn.
Yep. All good friends of the survey and the research. Yeah. I think it was interesting. I saw them in the hallway and I said, so is TSC gonna, because that's who I knew for TSC, right? And Tony was really great. He said, yeah, actually this is kind of a mutual decision. TSC is going to be going more towards agentic marketing or AI marketing, right? And so I think that they wanted to sort of stay true to sort of that HR model for marketing. And Mary Ellen, who we've known for many years, who runs RepCap, kind of said, look, we'll come join me. We're doing more and more every day. And so it was a win-win on both sides, it sounded like, right?
Yeah, it was really great. I did get a small time to catch up with them. If you're listening, we'll get to Fremont Street next year, I think.
Yeah, you're going to make me.
So,
yes.
Yeah, no worries. We'll leave it at that. So we've also got some pretty big news. This was one, Stacey, I'm really glad you sent me this one because this one passed me by. This was a pretty eye-opening. How about this headline? 38% of workers would rather have an AI manager than a person. I don't know whether that's shocking that's so high or so low. I really don't know. But that is really cool. But as you mentioned, this really ties into probably the other big pop that you got, the other big sort of thing that we talked about a lot in a lot of our meetings. So long-term cluster model, it's this idea of bring your own AI. I wish you had able to spend more time on it during that talk. Next year, I think Steve's going to need to give you an extra 45 minutes because I think people really wanted to talk about this. Can you talk a little about bring your own AI and kind of where this all ties in?
Yeah, well, we know, so, there's always been this like, well, when we say only 31% of organizations are using AI currently in their HR processes and it drops to 12%, we're talking about embedded HRMS AI, right? And we're like, well, everybody's using AI. I'm like, well, it depends on how you're talking about it. And the short answer is yes, 81% of HR professionals told us that they were using AI to do a process or to do work related, right? Like not to do an HR process, but to do the kind of things that I think we're all doing, which is develop a plan, redo a PowerPoint, create, a new email, reword something, right? Which is, again, sort of standalone personal performance work, right? The big thing that we also noted, though, is that only about 14% of them are getting that paid for by work. Only 14% of them are paying for that on their own. Another like 30%, 40%, depending on sort of how you look at the number, are getting something paid for by work that they're kind of using in that fashion. The remainder of them are using a free version, which again, as I think I said in the session, like we'll leave that right there because the danger of that, right? Again, yes, they're not putting PII information right into it. Most HR professionals are much smarter than that. We know that. But what they are doing is asking the questions that could eventually, when you start to analyze through a free version model, all the different things that are happening, you could start to pinpoint which companies these IPs are coming from and the kind of questions that are being asked. And then you've got some data there, right? This is how today organizations source like leads. They know where you've hit on the website and which links you're looking at. And all of a sudden, I know that this company that's at this location is looking for this particular product, right? It's the same thing on this, right, that we're going to get. And so I do think this idea of bring your own AI is that we have to be very aware of what AI is being done. Because I think we keep saying people are afraid of it. They're not afraid of it. They're afraid of what idiotic managers and businesses will do with the idea of AI. Let's just be real honest about that. But they actually are appreciating the way that it is helping them do their job and do it better. And I think the other side of that picture is that if we then go do the other thing that we did in the internet days where we just locked down, nobody could have access to the internet. And we all know that didn't work very well to get your job done eventually, right? We might be restricting the best way we can use AI, which is that total employee performance, which is to help them do their job better. They train their own systems, they train their own technology. that cost is on them to some extent. Do we not want to bring that into our companies and leverage that performance that we're getting out of that? That's a much bigger conversation. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's something we have to start having early on, because I think organizations will do a lot of damage by either shutting off AI completely or not understanding that there is ways that companies can see what's being accessed in their company, right?
That's exactly it. And it is, I don't know if unfortunate or fortunate, it's going to have to come from HR.
Yeah.
It may have seemed like on its surface that this is an IT conversation, but do you really want to seed that? And are they really the people to do that? No.
One of the stats we show this year is the percentage of IT professionals. Our survey is taken by CEOs, finance, IT, everybody who has touches HR systems, right? Which is a lot of people. And what we found is that IT professionals went up by almost 20-30% this year in their overall view of HR as being more strategic. They went from like 30 something to 54% this year, higher than HR itself this year. And my take on that is all of a sudden IT said, oh crap, this is what it's like to manage a work or a group of things that don't have a yes or no or a black and white approach to how they're going to come out, where the answer might be different every time, like a workforce. The only group inside your organization who understands what it's like to manage a dynamic group of resources who will change their mind and make decisions without you being aware of the parameters is the human resource function.
Yeah.
And IT is becoming very aware of the value of that capability. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
I love it. That's wonderful. And I believe you mentioned something in that when you were talking about that, where you said, they're not afraid of AI, they're afraid of idiotic managers. Yeah. Anyway, nothing. We've got the next story.
Again, what's the percentage of that are willing to be managed by AI versus the managers? Sorry about that. Yeah. But
No. You mentioned idiotic managers, and it's just interesting. Anyway, unrelated to that, H1-B visas now cost.
Did not know where you were going.
Now cost $100,000.
Our friends are laughing.
I know, unrelated. We're just on the next story. There's no segue there. So, just throw on just interesting term. So over the last week, we saw that the H1-B visas are now 100,000. There's some clarification that will only be for future visas, not current visas. Now, excuse me if you hear a little bit of, tiredness in my voice, because there's been a little bit of inconsistency, let's say, with the messaging and the actions taken. I'm not even sure I know that that's going to be the case. But for right now, 100,000 for an H1-B. And the point's been made, but we should reiterate, because our data set is reflective, because we have so many takers, of the actual worker population in the US, which is mostly small businesses. That's true worldwide, in fact. It's not just the US.
Yeah.
So when that happens, you really start to get a sense of like how important small businesses are. Of course, the news stories are going to focus on what the Fortune 50 is doing. And there's a lot of interest and a lot of cool things you can find about that. But that is not the backbone of business. And that's one of the reasons why we do a specialized SMB report, because it is extremely important to focus on what is the majority of business worldwide. So
it is what keeps the economy running on most levels.
While the Metas and the Alphabets may be able to handle this hit and have a lot of pre-existing, it's all right. And even then, I'm sure they're not totally happy. This will have an outsized impact on SMB. And that's definitely not, I don't find that to be a political statement. This has been said in nearly every outlet that I could find. So if for some reason you weren't aware of that, I would think long and hard about what you can do in the future with that information.
Yeah. To sort of add on to this, we have 2 actual research projects that we're working on right now for compliance, right? Compliance analysis and how organizations are handling compliance. So by the way, if you're interested in that, let us know. We're looking for people who want to interview on that topic, and then we'll give you the report when it's done. But partially, I think because of this sort of up and down, all over the place sort of model of compliance in the market, if I'm a small business and I don't know exactly where someone lives and I have to get all that paperwork, but I'm like, boy, this is the right talent for me. And then I find out they are not located in the United States, and I got it right. Like, there's just so many nuances to the legal ramifications of things like this and the changes this has and how many people this is going to impact. So the couple of companies that we're working with on some of these projects, they were like, yeah, I've got webinars scheduled tomorrow to deal with this issue, right? Like, because they've got to have answers for these, because they're compliance response organizations, right? We cannot overestimate the impact, I think, of anything that changes the rules for HR midway through their planning and their approach to employee handbooks and things, right? Like, yes, I mean, regulations change all the time, but the swiftness of this amount and the changes and how quickly they're coming are really impacting HR leaders who have to understand those and make decisions around them and plan for them and the impact and cost of them. And so that's where we're seeing stuff, probably the biggest charge. Even if I'm a Meta and I can handle this, now you've just added an X amount number of costs to any H1-B visas that I have inside my organization. The other side of this is that I think we're going to see is we have to remember this real fact. We've mentioned this before. If I'm a manufacturer, tariffs and those kind of things have a big impact on being able to manufacture in the United States, the value proposition that we're trying to reach, right? If I'm a service-based industry, it's now easier to just run my service-based industry outside of the US because financially it makes more sense. This is just one more added to that conversation. And we're already seeing that with tech firms. They are moving their leadership, they're moving their centers of sort of business models outside the US if I'm a service, because there's no tariff model on that has an impact on it. And so there's some real issues there, right?
Absolutely. And sort of speaking about, generating knowledge, there was a really cool post from Alan Bailey, Smart Recruiters, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't know Alan. So we don't, a lot of times people think, well, we know everybody in the market. And Alan Bailey is just someone I hadn't met, but she's worked with Smart Recruiters for 3 years in their communications. She used to do talent acquisition over at Intel and then some other big companies. And I just found her post after HR Tech. It was a very solid walkthrough of the kind of questions that someone should ask the vendors. And she was surprised nobody was talking about this stuff. You and I had put a lot of it in our emerging tech section of our paper. But I mean, Cliff, did you agree? Like some things she was talking about was like, we're not talking about streaming first data architecture, right? Like we're not having those levels of conversations. And I think we do. And did you think it was too technical, or do you agree with what
I think it's interesting because you mentioned this in the paper. We actually put in basically a glossary in our emerging tech section that's up now because terms are changing. Just you're talking about rules are changing, terms are changing. And it's important to know this because these are the conversations you need to be having. If you are a vendor and you've ever had Stacey, stare you down and ask you, what are you doing about RAG or, the retrieval augmented generation, and you're not sure, she's not doing it to put you on the spot. It's because these are things people need to know, right? You cannot just be like, oh, there's a static data set. You need to be able to pull data as it is updated in real life. That's what that is. So it's these sort of things that are like, oh, that's this new tech. No. It's what everything is based on now. The idea of, we've been talking about agents. What about orchestrators? What about those things that are there orchestrating the agents? I'm perfectly humble. I didn't know all of these terms, so this was very useful. We will post a link to her post, and you can check that out because there's a lot of stuff. And again, there's also a bit of a primer in this in our paper as well, because if we're going to be throwing around these terms, it's important to know it. It's important for you to know it from your buyer, as a buyer too.
Yeah, and to ask the vendors about it. Yeah, important stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Cliff, I know we're running up against our promised hour that we gave everybody. We've got how many more? I think we've got two more.
This is it. No, this is the last one. And this is a little more fun. It was a video, working in the wee hours. Trevor Noah, who is apparently Microsoft's chief questions officer, and Mustafa Suleiman from CEO of Microsoft's AI and co-founded Google's DeepMind, had a pretty interesting conversation. Again, we'll put the link in both our LinkedIn and our YouTube post, but it was pretty interesting. I mean, the headline alone is great. Will AI save humanity or end it? I found some very interesting topics. One of the things, it's around the 30-minute mark, I believe, where Mr. Suleiman is talking about, we might need to actually increase or introduce friction into some of the rollout of these technologies or in the adoption of these technologies. Basically trying to say we have to sort of slow down these things. We just talked about all these new terms. It's like learning a new language. You need to understand these things because they're coming so fast that there's a possibility that we outstrip our ability to sort of govern and use these tools, right? And then we're just like, we'll just have those tools govern those tools, right? And it's like, I don't know. And, so it's a nice little back and forth. But, it's something that in Alan Bailey's post, she talked about a lot too. It's just like, it can feel overwhelming, but at the same time, you can't just let it be like, you got to see through the hype and get to what is really happening out there, which we try to do in our research as well.
Yeah, and I like Trevor Noah's comment on here when I was listening to it, where he said, he's of the mind, like, you can't be so scared of it that you just kind of hide away from it and say, I'm not going to use it, right? Like, that you have to be part of the conversation because it's coming. It's like a locomotive. It's coming no matter what. So I always tell people, and so what you have to be is the most prepared possible so you can help guide the direction that it's happening. And particularly for HR professionals, I think we are not saying that you have to be an AI, efficient, on everything. What we're saying is you have to know enough to have the conversations with your team internally to help them make good business decisions so that they are not financially and business led wise making decisions based off of the latest hype or the latest, IT sort of a cool thing, that they're making decisions based off of what's best for the people and for the business outcome, both those things. So that's
And
our kind of final soapbox on that, right?
yeah, and I think there'll be a great conversation. We're going to be having a webinar, co-sponsored by ADP on December 10th, how HR and IT need to work together. I swear I did not know to plug that. I forgot that we had that. But we'll also be at some events. You want to take us out, Stacey?
Yeah,
Actually,
let's just talk about the quick events. If you're still listening and hanging in there with us,
Thank
guys,
you.
first of all, thank you. We get it. This is a long one. We had to talk about all the things that we had seen this week. But we will be at a lot of upcoming events. I'm going to be doing a Equifax CAB event September 30th in Phoenix. So I'm very excited. That's next week. And so I will be doing basically a rundown, a little bit of what we did at HR Tech, but some newer stuff for enterprise-based organizations. So excited about that. We are also going to be at the Dayforce Discover event, October 6th through the 8th in Las Vegas at the Wynn, one of my favorite hotels. So I was happy to see that. Which, by the way, a shout out, we did do a nice sort of day after HR Tech at a nice sort of pool area that was in that area. So sometimes it's nice just to get away in Las Vegas, right? You're going to be at Oracle Cloud World on October 13th through the 16th, Cliff, right? So you'll be back in Las Vegas again. Then we are both going to be back in Las Vegas the week after that, or 2 weeks after that, November 3rd through the 6th at the UKG Aspire event. And that same week, I'm also heading back to Philadelphia to do iCIMS last 2 regional sessions and my keynotes with them, November 5th and the 6th, and then November 13th and 14th. We think right now we're still kind of working out the logistics. We'll also be at Unit 4 Analyst Day in Atlanta, correct, Cliff?
Yeah,
November 12th and 13th. And then we're both going to be over at November 13th and 14th in New York City to do our FATE Finance Technology Expo. If you're interested, all of the roundtables have sold out. So as vendors go, there's that you can't purchase anymore. But I do think they have a few more booths if you're interested. And so we're helping them just find some people who might want more booths. Then I will be at the Workday EMEA event November 16th through 20th. I'm going to take a week off for Thanksgiving, hopefully. And then you and I will be doing an iSolve deep dive session in Charlotte, December 2nd and 3rd, to give them an update on sort of all the data that they have this year. I am sure there will be more, but that basically is just going to be a massive amount of traveling for you and I over the next couple of months. I think we were like, oh my gosh, like Christmas is in this model like 8 weeks away or something, right? So we're really excited about all the things we're getting a chance to do. We want to say thank you to everyone who's hung in there with us today. I know there is a lot going on. We are going to keep you up to date as usual. As we wrap today, just a reminder, if you want to buy those segments, we have payroll, we have HRMS, and we have emerging tech already out in our research center. And if you want to check out our new website, Terry Zipper worked really hard on this. Let her know if you like it. Websites are always those things that people spend so much time on. Terry Zipper, Summer Milano, Cole Harris, all of them worked hard on putting up a new website. So that's up, and go check it out for our new website. Also, if you want to get more information, sign up on that website for our newsletter, and that'll give you all the updates on when the research is out, where you can access it, how you can access it, and some free newbies as well. Be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by our CEO, Terry Zipper. And if you would really like these HR Huddle podcasts at our Work to Find Home, please leave comments, rates. It really helps us out a lot, helps them know that there's value in continuing to sort of have this available. I think we were really excited. We hit 1,000 downloads a week. I want to say last week or one of the weeks upcoming. So we were very excited about that. To stay up to date on immediate breaking HR tech news and get all of the behind the scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn and Instagram. So hopefully some of you have seen our updates on LinkedIn about HR tech. And Cliff, that is it for today. Thank you for all the work that you put into doing this. We couldn't do this without you. Thanks to our production team, Brand Method Media Group, who is run by Kelly Kelly, who's our amazing founder, and our marketing team, Summer Milano, Cole Harris, Linda Galloway, Kate, Lynn Diamond, Kendall Lowry now. We've got the whole team now that's sort of supporting all of that. And thanks to our listeners and community. We couldn't do this without you. You are the most important element of this. Thanks for all those who came up and said hi to us and that you listened to us on the podcast at HR Tech. We really appreciated that. And that's it for this episode of Spillin' Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. and Cliff will bring all the exciting news for you. So bye,
Bye.
bye guys.